So in the first part of this introduction to the poem, we looked at the contrast between the two men, the man who's under pressure from work and the man who's the hippie, the drifter, the hitcher. And the last thing I said there was that we kind of assume in the first stanza that this man is feeling quite stressed by his life, but actually all it says is I'd been tired under the weather. Because when we get to the third stanza and we find that the man kills this other man but doesn't even swerve, we wonder how stressed the man was, or whether the way in which his anxieties manifest themselves is in this cold-blooded act of murder. And if you look at the language there, I let him have it on the top road out of Harrogate. I let him have it seems like a strange term to use. It's kind of a euphemism. It masks the truth. It doesn't say I killed him, I murdered him, I beat him to death, I let him have it. We do notice that quite a bit in Armitage's poetry. He's very good at using what we call colloquial language, or the language of speech, and words and phrases that people use that somehow soften the ugly realities of life. So I dropped it into third and leant across to let him out. That's quite interesting, isn't it? I leant across to let him out, not to push him out, to let him out. It's as if he's got to his destination and he's saying goodbye to him. Again, it's another sort of euphemism. And saw him in the mirror bouncing off the curb, then disappearing down the verge. It's quite harsh, but there's something quite cold about it. There's very little emotion in this poem. It's told in a very clinical way. I saw him in the mirror bouncing off the curb, then disappearing down the verge, as if he's just dropped something out of the car which is not human. And he kind of looks back to see this thing that he's accidentally dropped out of the car. And then again, we get this sort of what we call, in many ways, a non sequitur. A non sequitur, N-O-N-S-E-Q-U-I-T-U-R. A non sequitur is something that it means does not follow. And in a sentence, we get two sentences. He's disappearing down the verge. We were the same age, give or take a week. That doesn't really seem to follow what he's just seen. He has this thought about the age, but it doesn't really link to watching him bounce down the curb. And again, it's the same for the rest of the poem. He said he'd like the breeze to run its fingers through his hair. It was 12 noon. The outlook for the day was moderate to fair. Stitch that, I remember thinking. You can walk from there. And that strange, slightly jumbled ending. And we saw that slightly jumbled ending with gooseberry season. Because at the end, across the meadow, on the count of 4, threw him over the border. This is not general knowledge except in gooseberry season. Can you see the way in which the narrator jumps from one thing to the next? And this seems to suggest a rather disordered mind, a mind that finds it quite hard to stay on track. In many ways we seem to be presented in these two poems with men with sociopathic, psychopathic tendencies. But it's not glamorised, it's not made to seem anything other than really quite tragic. So let's just finish off and look at the end of this poem. We were the same age, give or take a week. He said he liked the breeze to run its fingers through his hair. It was 12 noon. The outlook for the day was moderate to fair. It's as if he's already distanced himself from any emotional contact with what he's just done. He's thinking about the weather. He's thinking about something the man said. He's thinking about the time. We feel a distance, we feel a movement away from the brutal reality. He's already stopped thinking about what happened, if he was thinking about it at all. And then there's last two lines. Stitch that, I remember thinking. You can walk from there. How can he walk? The man is dead. Or, if not dead, certainly very seriously injured, having been headbutted and beaten with a crook lock, a metal lock that you lock the steering wheel with on a car. So this man seems to be rather divorced from reality. Is it because of his stress of his job? Well, we're not really sure, and again, like so many of Armitage's poems, we're left scratching our head a bit. In the next podcast, what I'll do is I'll look a little bit more at the language and the structure of the poem.